There is a moment in every person's life where everything changes. Not when you win, not when you get recognized, but when you make a decision that most people never make. A decision about who you are going to be, no matter what happens to you. That decision is the foundation of what the world later called Mamba Mentality. And no, it didn't start with championships. It didn't start with trophies. It didn't start with applause. It started in silence. It started when no one was watching, when no one cared, when no one believed. Most people think Mamba Mentality is about being ruthless, intense, obsessed, or angry. It's not. At its core, Mamba Mentality is about ownership. Ownership of your effort. Ownership of your preparation. Ownership of your attitude. Ownership of your standards. Because here's the truth. Life doesn't care about your talent. Life doesn't care about your excuses. Life doesn't care about your past. Life only responds to what you consistently do. And that's where most people lose. They wait. They wait to feel motivated. They wait to feel confident. They wait until conditions are perfect. But Mamba Mentality doesn't wait. Mamba Mentality decides. It decides that the work comes first. It decides that excuses are irrelevant. It decides that feelings don't run the schedule. Discipline does. Kobe Bryant understood something very early that most people never fully accept. You don't become great by hoping for great days. You become great by dominating the ordinary ones. That's why he didn't ask, "How do I feel today?" He asked, "What needs to be done today?" And that question changes your entire life. Because the moment you stop negotiating with yourself, the moment you stop asking for permission, the moment you stop needing external validation, you gain control. Most people don't lack talent. They lack standards. They say they want success, but they live casually. They say they want greatness, but they tolerate comfort. They say they want more, but they keep choosing easy. Mamba Mentality doesn't hate comfort. It simply refuses to be controlled by it. It understands something brutally simple. Every excuse you accept today becomes the ceiling you live under tomorrow. That's why the real enemy was never other players. It was never critics. It was never competition. The enemy was complacency. The enemy was laziness disguised as balance. The enemy was distraction disguised as rest. The enemy was potential that never turned into execution. Mamba Mentality is not about being better than others. It's about being better than who you were yesterday, relentlessly. And that starts with a decision. A quiet one. A personal one. A decision that says, "I don't need to be pushed. I don't need to be reminded. I don't need to be motivated. I will do the work, especially when I don't feel like it." Because that's where separation happens. That's where lives change. That's where Mamba Mentality begins. Discipline is not motivation. Motivation is loud. Discipline is quiet. Motivation shows up when things feel good. Discipline shows up when things feel heavy. And this is where the separation begins. Because everyone loves the idea of greatness. Very few people love the process that greatness demands. Mamba Mentality doesn't romanticize the work. It respects it. It understands that discipline is not about being excited. It's about being committed. Committed on days when your body is tired. Committed on days when your mind is foggy. Committed on days when no one is watching and nothing is guaranteed. That's the part most people never see. They see highlights. They see championships. They see confidence. They don't see the mornings when your alarm goes off and everything inside you wants to stay in bed. They don't see the nights when you're alone in the gym, hearing nothing but your own breath and the sound of the ball hitting the floor. They don't see the isolation, and isolation is uncomfortable. Because when you're disciplined, you start to live differently. You eat differently, you sleep differently, you train differently, you think differently, and slowly you drift away. Not because you think you're better, but because your standards no longer match your surroundings. That's one of the hardest truths of Mamba Mentality. If you truly commit to excellence, you will outgrow some people. Not everyone wants to wake up early. Not everyone wants to sacrifice. Not everyone wants to be honest about their weaknesses. And when you choose discipline, you expose that. So people will call you extreme. They'll say you're doing too much. They'll say you need to relax. They'll say life isn't that serious. But Mamba Mentality knows something they don't. Life becomes serious the moment you realize you only get one shot at becoming who you're capable of being. Pain is part of that process. Not pain as punishment. Pain as feedback. Pain tells you where you're weak. Pain tells you where you need to grow. Pain tells you where you're avoiding the work. Most people run from pain. Mamba Mentality studies it. Because pain doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're stretching beyond who you were. And here's the part people don't like to hear. If your life feels comfortable all the time, you're probably not growing. Growth demands resistance. Growth demands tension. Growth demands repetition when the novelty is gone. That's why discipline beats talent in the long run. Talent wants results fast. Discipline understands time. Talent wants validation. Discipline wants progress. Talent asks, is this worth it? Discipline asks, what's required? And when you live like that long enough, something changes. Your confidence stops coming from words. It stops coming from opinions. It stops coming from external praise. It comes from knowing, I showed up. I did the work. I didn't cheat myself. That kind of confidence is quiet. It doesn't need to announce itself. It walks into the room already prepared. And that's why Mamba Mentality isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. Because discipline, repeated daily, creates a presence that speaks for itself. People love to talk about balance. Balance sounds mature. Balance sounds healthy. Balance sounds reasonable. But balance is often just another word for comfort. And comfort has never created anything extraordinary. Mamba Mentality isn't about chaos. It isn't about burning yourself out for no reason. It's about intentional obsession. Obsession with getting better. Obsession with details. Obsession with preparation. Not because someone is watching, but because you are watching. Most people crack under pressure because pressure exposes something uncomfortable. They don't actually know who they are without validation. When applause disappears, when results slow down, when criticism gets louder, they lose direction. Mamba Mentality doesn't, because it doesn't borrow identity from outcomes. Wins don't define it. Losses don't break it. Opinions don't move it. The identity is built before the pressure arrives. And that identity sounds like this. I do the work whether it's celebrated or ignored. I prepare whether I'm confident or afraid. I show up whether today feels important or not. That's why pressure feels different. To most people, pressure is threatening. To Mamba Mentality, pressure is familiar. It feels like training. It feels like repetition. It feels like home. Because when you've already suffered voluntarily in preparation, nothing external can scare you. That's the advantage most people never develop. They avoid discomfort their entire lives. then panic when life delivers it anyway. Mamba mentality flips that equation. It chooses discomfort early, so fear has nothing left to take later. And this is where identity shifts. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries. You stop seeing yourself as someone who hopes. You start seeing yourself as someone who executes. That's dangerous, in a good way. Because once you identify as someone who executes, excuses stop making sense. You can't say, "I didn't feel like it," because that's not who you are anymore. You can't say, "I wasn't motivated," because that's irrelevant to your identity. You either lived up to your standard or you didn't. And that honesty is uncomfortable, but it's powerful. Because the moment you stop lying to yourself, your life starts moving forward fast. Most people want confidence. Mamba mentality builds certainty. Certainty that no matter what happens, you'll respond with discipline. Certainty that no matter the pressure, you won't abandon your standards. Certainty that your effort is non-negotiable. And once that identity locks in, you don't need balance as an excuse. You don't need motivation as a crutch. You don't need approval as fuel. You move differently. You walk differently. You speak differently. You train differently. Because you're no longer trying to become someone. You already decided who you are. At some point, success stops being enough. Not because success is bad, but because success alone feels empty when it isn't connected to meaning. Mamba mentality was never about basketball. Basketball was just the arena. What really mattered was the standard you hold when no one is clapping, the standard you hold when the work feels repetitive, the standard you hold when the results don't come fast enough. Because trophies eventually gather dust, records eventually get broken, titles eventually belong to someone else, but who you became in the process, that stays. Mamba mentality gives you something most people never experience: respect for yourself. Not the kind that comes from likes, not the kind that comes from praise, but the quiet respect that comes from knowing, I didn't waste my potential. I didn't betray my standards. I didn't quit on myself. That's legacy. Legacy isn't what people say about you. Legacy is what you leave inside other people. When someone watches how you work, how you prepare, how you respond to failure, and they think, if they can live like that, maybe I can too. That's impact. Mamba mentality teaches you that your life is not about being perfect. It's about being intentional. Intentional with your time. Intentional with your energy. Intentional with who you allow access to your mind. Because every day, whether you admit it or not, you're teaching people how to treat effort. You're teaching people what's acceptable. You're teaching people what commitment looks like. And most importantly, you're teaching yourself. That's why Mamba mentality doesn't end when the game ends. It shows up in how you wake up, how you train when no one forces you, how you respond when things fall apart, how you rebuild when life humbles you. It gives structure to chaos, purpose to pain, direction to uncertainty. And maybe the most important thing it gives you is this: peace. Not comfort, not ease, but peace. Peace that comes from alignment. Peace that comes from knowing your actions match your values. Peace that comes from living a life you respect. Because at the end of it all, when the noise is gone, when the lights are off, when there's nothing left to prove, the only question that matters is simple. Did you live up to what you were capable of? Mamba mentality doesn't guarantee success, but it guarantees this: you won't look back wondering, what if? At the end of the day, Mamba mentality is not something you're born with. It's something you choose every single day. You choose it when your alarm goes off and no one would know if you stayed in bed. You choose it when quitting would be easier than continuing. You choose it when excuses sound reasonable and you ignore them anyway. That's the part people misunderstand. Mamba mentality is not one big heroic moment. It's thousands of small, unglamorous decisions stacked on top of each other. No crowd, no applause, no guarantee. Just you and your standard. And here's the uncomfortable truth. No one is coming to save you. No one is coming to push you. No one is coming to make your life meaningful. That responsibility belongs to you. Mamba mentality doesn't ask if you're ready. It asks if you're willing. Willing to be misunderstood. Willing to be uncomfortable. Willing to sacrifice short-term pleasure for long-term respect. Because the life you want is on the other side of the work you're avoiding. And deep down, you already know what that work is. You don't need more information. You don't need more motivation. You don't need another quote. You need a decision. A decision to stop negotiating with your potential. A decision to stop waiting for perfect conditions. A decision to stop living casually with something that matters deeply to you. Mamba mentality doesn't promise an easy life. It promises an honest one, an honest effort, an honest standard, an honest relationship with who you are and who you could become. And when you live like that, truly live like that, something shifts. You stop fearing failure. You stop chasing validation. You stop comparing your path to someone else's. You become focused. You become grounded. You become dangerous in the best way. Not because you're trying to prove something to the world, but because you refuse to disappoint yourself. And one day, far from now, when the noise is gone and the results are whatever they are, you'll be able to say this: I showed up. I did the work. I lived by my standard. That's what Mamba mentality does to your life. It doesn't just change what you achieve, it changes who you become.